Hi folks, and welcome to this new bonus lesson for volume 3. First thing that I want to say is that I'm going to create a few more bonus lessons for volume 3, but they will be shorter than for previous volumes, but there will be at least 4 of them. If you are asking yourself why, the answer is really simple. I was rather bombarded on the support emails to cover some specific topic, and in this case we will cover something that is really interesting. And I tend to cover something that you really cannot find the answer to when using a search engine, or even if someone asked a question on a forum and had no answer. I really like to tackle those problems. The first problem we will talk about is how to create a zipper. So let's create that zipper setup, and I'm expecting from you to be really familiar with Cinema 4D by now. And you should have a really decent understanding if you watched all 3 volumes by now and accompanied by bonus lessons, of course. This way I can concentrate and be a little bit more quicker than usual, because I really don't want to waste time on explaining steps that you should already know by now. So let's start. We can actually start by creating a simple object that would represent the small element that is zipper made of. Let's use some clean values here, something like 100 with, it should be really smaller, let's say maybe 40, and it should be something like maybe 20, or let's try this so it's oriented the different way. So let's try 40 here, yes, something like this. We could also later play with this fillet and fillet radius and subdivisions options, but it will be really fine for now. So we want to keep the setup light until the last moment. Since I don't want to model every single of this element, I will clone them, and I will pull this guy in one direction for 50 centimeters. That is exactly the half of its size. So once I copy the setup on this side, I will have them completely symmetrical. There will be a symmetry plane right in the world center. It will all be really clear once I do it. So let's clone it. Let's hold the Alt key and select the cloner here, and the cloner will become the parent of that cube. So let's adjust it in some reasonable fashion. I want it to go in Z direction, let's say 100 centimeters for the gap in between them, and let's say 10 pieces. And since those zipper parts really come and fit together nicely, let me just doodle it for you, so like this. Then this space in between all these guys has to be exactly the size of this cube in this Z direction, okay? But doubled. If you don't believe me, I will show you very quickly. You can read out the size here. It's 40 centimeters, and just for the sake of the tutorial, I will put 40 here and watch what happens. They will fit perfectly. So if we double the size, you can actually type times 2 here. In every these boxes in Cinema 4D, and those mathematical operations work. So if we double that, we will leave exactly the space for another row of those elements. So now we have one side. I'll simply control drag this guy to copy it and simply move it for 100 units here. Okay? Now I'm completely sure that they are exactly touching each other. What I also want to do, I want to offset this a bit so it really fits in this gap. So now it's 40 centimeters, so I will hold the shift key, and that will constrain by exactly the settings you have here, so you can quantize and enter any of your values. So watch closely. Now it will do the 10 centimeters quantization. You can enter any value here. Okay. If this is disabled by pressing the shift key, you are actually enable it for that moment. So now we have a row of zippers. Let me just enable guard shading here so I can see the lines. And now comes the technical part of it. So how do we make them connect together? So these guys should really fit together, okay? Like here, and form a single closed zipper. So how do we do that? Before we proceed, I will do a little bit of housekeeping. So I will call this left, just with a capital L, and this one will be right. So just to avoid any possible confusions later. For this to work, we have to have some sort of tool that will affect all these clones in a row. And those guys that affect those clones are here, and they are called effectors. The one we are looking for is actually a really simple plain effector. So let me drop it here, and it doesn't do much by itself, and it will automatically add itself under effectors list on the cloner that was selected. So let me just demonstrate that. So if I have both cloners selected and go here under MoGraph effectors and select plane, it will add that effector to both of these guys. Let me just delete it from this left guy, as I will work on this right guy only. You can see something happened, and if I play around with that effector, nothing will happen. Let me undo that. And you will be starting asking yourself, what does this effector do? And it actually moved all these clones by 100 units in Y direction. Watch here. So if I drop this to 0, this means it will do absolutely nothing. It will not change the clones. But what if I tell it to move here in this direction by 100 units? So minus 100, this will happen. Okay? So the effect is overall and complete on all clones. We want to confine it to a small amount, so we actually have a zipper that will move those guys by some value and keep them that way. I'll actually put minus 50 here, okay, because I will tell to this other row of clones to move 50 units also, so they will move 100 units combined. I hope this is not too difficult to follow. So if I rename this to right, because it affects the right cloner, simply copy it and rename it left, so I really know which one does what. And I will apply this left one to this left cloner. Okay, so I'll drop it here, and I will change a single value. That value will be, instead of minus 50, it will be 50. Okay, so now we have our zipper zipped. It is locked. Okay, and if you play with this value, you can actually see it really does that. So we have to find a way to say to these effectors to not affect the complete cloner, rather a shape we define, and we can define the shape here under fall off. Okay? Currently it's set to infinite, so it simply affects all clones. To really simplify it, the answer is linear. So let me put it to linear mode. That means I'll actually hide this left guy. So if I drag this guy right now, watch what happens. It will really slide them and leave them as they are. I can even really enhance that effect by increasing this fall off completely. So we will have a really nice curvy transition, just as a real zipper. Okay, so let me undo that to the start. I will do the same thing for this left guy. So here under fall off, I will set it to linear. I will increase the fall off to 100%, and I can actually group these two guys under a null, and this will be my zipper control. Okay, so now I can actually hide the visibility of those guys, and I have a much more simplified view here. So now if I will pull this, the zipper will zip. We can go a step further by adding standard controller to our zipper, and we have a visual feedback. You can really experiment with the settings here under fillet. So we have a really nice representation of something like this. 5 free, and this setup works on a spline also, so you can create a spline shape to define the zipper or actually extract the spline from an existing mesh. In that case, you should use object mode here and simply use a spline, and then you will have to align this zipper control to a spline with this, for the tags align to spline. This is really simple. I don't see a reason why I should do that. It's really simple to understand. So now we have a nice zipper setup. You can play with the offsets value here. Okay, so something like this. So you can have somewhat a little bit of random results, and that is it. You have a zipper setup. This is really a nice solution. Let me show you another little setup that was really difficult to get. Here I will build a setup that will be quite interesting, and I'm going to build eyelashes for this nice lady I modeled for upcoming volume. So I'm going to build eyelashes, and probably many of you will ask, well, what's the big deal? You can use the hair. Well, hair does have certain limitations to it, and it can be occasionally really clumsy to build a setup that is good for eyelashes, because you really don't have a way to control those hairs really uniformly the way you would want for eyelashes. Another reason would be, what if you have to export this in another 3D package or in a third-party render engine? Then of course you can also convert the hair, but you would rather want to use something that is much more easily controllable. In this case, for the hair of this female character, it's really logical to use the hair itself, simply because it gives you all the tools and all the characteristics of hair. But for something a little bit more simple like eyelashes, you would rather want to use something else, and that else will be the most spline. So without further delay, let me start by selecting this head spline, and if you watch closely, I selected it from the mesh and simply converted with this structure edit edge to spline. So I simply took this selected area on the mesh and simply converted to a spline with that function. So that is really understandable, and I'll hide the hair for this character. It's kind of in the way, and maybe even the complete head. So we are only left with this spline that follows exactly the shape of our head mesh. I also wanted to show you a use of this mouse spline, because it's really difficult to understand if you expect something spectacular from it. This mouse spline can produce spectacular results, but it is just a spline and you should treat it like a spline. So let's actually create that single eyelash we will clone. First, here under object, I will change the display mode from this greenish thing to a line. I find it much more appealing and easier to work with. I will also change some settings here, so you can really say that eyelash is not really that long. It's more about, say, something around 20. You can even hide the axis, so it's easier to see. And it also doesn't have to have so many segments. So it has 100 points on this space. That is really too much. I would say 10 is more than enough. And here is where people make mistake. These segments is not the segments on the spline, the points on the spline. This actually represents something else, and it will do absolutely nothing until you choose one of these angles and watch what happens. So here you will actually add the number of those cloned splines inside the mouse spline itself. Okay, so you can choose any angle. Of course, you have additional settings here. We will actually use them, but for this purpose, we only need one segment because we will clone this one. So let's first drop that mouse spline under cloner object. So we'll hold the Alt key and we will get a standard setup here. We of course want to change it because we want to clone this to an object. In this case, our object will be this head spline. Okay, so now we have some hairs going on here, but we will naturally have to play with the settings here under mouse spline. So let's adjust this angle until we get something that is good. So let's say 50 degrees would be pretty good. Let's go with the next angle. This next angle should be, it can also be 50 if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so something like this when you watch from the side, and we will of course now under mouse spline we will utilize this bend guy. So let's give it a shot, something like say -60 would be fine. I believe that would be fine. And under cloner we'll simply increase the count of this guy. So let's say 100 hairs or even more. Let's try 200. Maybe this will work. And I will enable my head mesh so you can actually see how that works in conjunction with that head mesh. I can really increase this just a little bit, maybe somewhere around 70. We're looking for a pretty decent number, something that pleases me. So now we can actually see that we have some splines going on, and that is this mouse spline that is really versatile and has all these settings, and all those settings will reflect to every single clone. This is very useful because you can control that eyelash or similar things very quickly without using brush tools for hair or stuff like that, which can become a really tedious process. What is also beautiful, you can now utilize effectors. You can utilize them on a mouse spline itself or the cloner itself. So let's drop let's say a random effector here, and here under effector parameters, under effector attributes, I will disable this position and simply enable this scale and add a really small value here, something like 0.2 maybe, something like this. So I will get really random results in those generated splines. And I want to do a little something. I want to change the display color of these guys. So currently they're sort of grayish white and they're really hard to see, and I want to change that, and I really don't have an option for it. So even if I give it a try here and say use color, for example, use something like this, it won't represent them with that color. Okay? So it simply doesn't work. What it works, you can actually select it, you can add it to a new layer. So like this. And now if you enable this layer color under display, it will actually display the layer color which it belongs to. It is much more easier to see. I can actually change that color to something a little bit more nice. And I find myself often playing with colors because I really like that. And you can actually see now we have a really nice and quick setup. What is good about it? You can utilize any of these generators here on your mouse spline because it's simply a spline. Because if you press C, it will convert it to a regular spline. But if it is a mouse spline, you have access to these parameters which can really help you out to do quick changes for your complete setup. So let me just demonstrate that with let's say a sweep object. We will drop a sweep object. Let's create a simple circle spline and really use this mouse spline just as we would in a normal setup and drop that everything under cloner. And you can actually see it created the sweeps. Okay? So you can now play with, let's say, end scale. Let's enter 10 here. You will get something more resembling to a hair. So this is really useful. So let me just pull it out, delete this guy. And what is good, you can always press C and with a simple command here under simulation, you can actually convert from spline. That means that spline will be converted to hair. So you have really versatile setup. You have options, you have flexibility. That is what you have to drive to. And I believe that is it for these bonus lessons. And I just want to say there will be many bonus lessons for this volume 3 simply because rigging is really a major topic. And I will try to squeeze every single suggestion I got. And the next bonus will most probably be about cloth because there were many requests by you show how to model a cloth or set up something with cloth or something like that, and I will do that for next bonus lesson.